Programs usually seen at this time will not be broadcast, so that we may bring you the following NBC News special. NBC News presidential inauguration coverage is being sponsored in part by Ford and your local Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? By the Sun Company, where there's sun, there's energy. And by AT&T, we're reaching out in new directions.
Good morning, all. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News in Washington, here with John Chancellor and the entire NBC News team. And welcome to your nation's capital, where politicians have been reminded once again that for all of their power and authority, all of their celebrity and ceremony, nature prevails. And on this day, nature has delivered to the capital city temperatures hovering right now at 0 degrees. That means a wind chill factor of 14 degrees below zero, and that has radically altered the inaugural ceremonies that were scheduled for today, the public ceremonies at the Capitol and at the White House. The parade has been canceled, and the inaugural ceremonies that were scheduled for the west front of the Capitol now have been moved inside to the rotunda.
Tom, Albert Einstein once said that mathematics is all well and good, but every once in a while nature just leads you around by the nose.
President Reagan, at 73 years and 349 days, is not only the oldest president, but he's about to be the coldest president on his public inaugural day as well. He has been sworn in, of course. That occurred yesterday in simple but elegant ceremonies at the White House. The president and the vice president sworn in on the constitutionally approved day of January 20th. This was the day for public celebration, and as I say, those celebrations now have been altered slightly. We are going to go to Bob Hager, who is on Pennsylvania Avenue, to give you an idea of just how cold it is and how
these grandstands will be empty today. There'll be no parade, no bands marching by. And for young musicians from around the country who traveled hundreds of miles and raised thousands of dollars to pay their own way here, it's a disappointment as bitter as the temperatures. For most of yesterday, the wind howled and the snow blew. Temperatures dropped to 0. A band from Hacienda Heights, California tried to ignore the weather at a final practice. But by evening time, inaugural chairman Ron Walker called all band leaders together to announce the oath-taking would be moved inside and the parade called off. He said he thought he'd planned for almost every contingency.
I thought we were able to do that, with the exception of the weather, and that's the Lord's way of letting us know he's still in charge.
Groups like the Robert E. Lee High School Band from Midland, Texas, had been preparing for this day for months, hoping to be selected to come to Washington. Last month, when they heard they had been chosen, the students were overjoyed.
Presidential Inaugural Committee.
To pay for its trip, the band had to raise $170,000. They did it in less than 3 weeks, selling turkeys and hams and accepting donations from proud Midland citizens. Last night, when they returned to their hotel in the Washington, D.C. suburbs after dinner, band leader Randy Story called them together.
And they told us that President Reagan had decided that because of the weather that we would cancel the parade. You know, you still got to know that, you know, you were the band from the state of Texas. And the president just did not want anybody to be hurt.
A parent, Sandy Smith, who organized the fundraising drive.
You know what this trip meant to all of us. It didn't turn out quite like we meant for it to, but we'll take what's left and still keep our pride together, and let's do it just like we always do.
There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it, okay?
But elsewhere, students from another band suddenly decided last night to practice one more time. Practice for nothing, just to forget their disappointment.
Let's just do it, okay?
And as bad as they felt, practice they did. Most of the bands will now be invited to join the president at the Capitol Center, an indoor arena here, this afternoon. But for the youngsters, it won't be the same as parading their hometown colors down Pennsylvania Avenue. Robert Hager, NBC News on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Thanks, Robert. By the way, people who paid up to $100 a ticket for some of the select seats along Pennsylvania Avenue now will have their money refunded if they apply for a refund before February 10th. That's according to the official inaugural committee. The contractor, however, who bid on the seats at the public ceremonies in the west front of the White House deliberately underbid. That is, he built them for less than what it may cost him because he thought he was going to be able to sell sections of those inaugural stands to souvenir hunters. Whether or not he'll be able to get top dollar for those or not, we don't know. A lot has been scrambled on this very cold, bitter day in Washington, D.C. One thing has not changed. The president's press spokesman still is Larry Speaks, who hails from deep in Mississippi, and he's with Chris Wallace. Let's see how the two of them are getting along right now. How you doing out there?
Well, we're doing just fine, and in fact, it's so nice here right now, the sun beaming down, that Larry Speaks just said to me, you know, if we'd known it was going to be this comfortable, maybe we could have gone ahead. But the weather does kind of catch up on you, doesn't it?
That's true. I've been on here only a few minutes. I think some of the participants would have had to been out several hours, and we really had no choice. I think we would have had some frostbite and maybe some serious problems had we elected to stay outside.
You just accompanied the president and Mrs. Reagan over to church this morning. Do they have anything to say about the weather, which is becoming the big story of this inauguration?
Well, I think everybody has a little bit to say about the weather. I think the president was invigorated a bit by the briskness out here, but I think they're off and running and ready for a glorious day here.
How disappointed are they that the parade has been canceled and that the swearing-in has been moved indoors?
Well, I think they're disappointed, as is everybody, and they're really more disappointed for the participants in it and the people who had come a long way to participate in the parade, come a long way to see the historic swearing-in ceremony. So I think that was their main consideration when they thought about it.
Now, the president and Mrs. Reagan will go this afternoon to suburban Maryland to an event for the bands?
Yes, after the inaugural ceremony in the rotunda of the Capitol, they'll come back to the White House briefly.
This is not working.
Then helicopter out to the Capitol Center.
What do I do
Maryland,
when it says memorize?
where they will see the assembled bands, probably 12, 15, 16,000 parade participants there this afternoon. And they'll hear a little musical conclusion that would have taken place at the parade. And then the president will address them, thanking them for their participation and saying, maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Well, not another inaugural, I don't think, though.
Not right off the bat.
Is he going to go to all the balls tonight, or is the weather going to curtail that?
No, I think they'll go through their full schedule. Really, there's not much change. The inaugural ceremony will go on the same length, everything in it, except for the indoors and rather than outdoors. The parade, as we just mentioned, is different, but there are 10 balls tonight, and they'll make every one of them. I think they'll be home after midnight tonight.
Larry Speaks, thanks very much, and we're going to let you get in out of the cold. Tom?
Thank you very much. Chris Wallace at the White House today with Larry Speaks, who's the president's official spokesman. Just to bring you up to date, of course, the public inaugural ceremonies now outside the west front of the Capitol have been canceled for today. The swearing-in ceremony, the public version of that, and the president's speech will take place in the rotunda of the Capitol with a select invited few people. 140,000 folks altogether were expected to attend the outdoor inaugural ceremonies, just the public side, because the president was sworn in privately yesterday. Now that has been reduced, and a lot of folks have spent a lot of money to come here from all over the country. They're going to be obviously disappointed as well, but an important thing to remember about this kind of weather. The city looks absolutely magnificent today, but when the wind chill is 14 degrees below zero, it is extremely dangerous out there. Frostbite and more serious injuries can happen in a hurry.
Well, you know, it looks pretty, but it is, as Tom says, it's dangerous. Some of those kids, and some of those kids we saw from Texas, were scheduled to be out at 4 a.m. this morning, beginning to get their bands in their costumes. And if you can imagine what 6 or 8 hours in this kind of cold would do to those kids, and think of the ones who have to play the brass instruments with the metal mouthpieces. How would you like to, in that cold? I mean, it just made no sense.
We don't want to make light of it, but they could have it permanently implanted on their lips if they were to go at that length.
It really was terrible here last night. It's nice today, but it was scary. And when you think of sending out just thousands of young kids in the dark with that kind of wind blowing and that kind of cold, there was just no choice.
Right. John, we have the president videotape of him going to church this morning, just across from the White House, just across Lafayette Square, that is. It is called St. John's Church. It is traditionally called the Church of the Presidents because that is where they can very easily attend services, and it has been there for a long time. There, as you see, the president and his Secret Service detail assembled in the limousine, a very short drive, and that's the first look that we've had at Mrs. Reagan's inaugural day outfit designed by Adolfo. She says that she chose the color blue because all of the states on the NBC News map the night of the election turned up blue for President Reagan. And that's a very blue outfit indeed.
By those terms, she's very often the Democrat, Tom. She likes red.
That's right. The president, very briefly, appearing with Mrs. Reagan today, as he emerged from St. John's Church just across from the White House. The Capitol Center will be the focus of our attention later this afternoon. That's where many of the marching units and the bands and the people who are going to participate in the parade will be putting on a show for the president and others later this afternoon between 2, 3, and 4 o'clock Eastern Time. They have been rearranging their schedules there as well. Jamie Gangale standing by now. Jamie?
Tom, not to be left out of the history books, we have a new piece of inaugural trivia for you. Since it seems to be freezing on President Reagan's parade outside, we're going to have the first inaugural parade ever held indoors. Well, almost. Actually, this is going to be a thank you, a command performance that's being billed by President Reagan. But most of the people who would have been in the parade are going to be in the audience this afternoon watching. I don't know if you know this, but if they had gone outside today, it was so cold that many of their instruments would not have worked. In fact, I think the only performers who would not have minded today's weather would have been the Alaskan dog sled team. Unfortunately, we will not be seeing them inside this afternoon. It'll be a much shorter version with military bands, and then the big finale with the all-star band where performers were picked from all over the 50 states. So we'll be staying here and watching. Both Vice President Bush and President Reagan will be here at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Tom?
Thanks, Jamie. And, of course, we'll have coverage throughout the day here of the Convention Center and all of the other activities that now have been rescheduled, including those public ceremonies in the rotunda of the Capitol later this afternoon. By the way, for history buffs, and there will be lots of new trivia after today, this is the first time since 1829 that the administration has been forced to move an inauguration indoors rather than outdoors, and that happened when Andrew Jackson, who was a tough old guy, decided that the weather was just too inclement when he was being inaugurated for the ceremonies to go on outdoors, so he moved them indoors.
Yeah, but you know, there's, excuse me, when you're finished, there's a jinx. There is a jinx that on second inaugurals, and that was true of Jackson, that was true of Grant, that was true of Cleveland, although he served 2 separate terms. The weather was terrible. It was terrible on Roosevelt's second inaugural, buckets of rain. And people who like to associate jinxes and myths with the presidents will pick up on this one because the Reagan second inaugural had to be put inside.
Well, we'll keep track of that. We'll keep track of lots more history as well, because during the course of NBC News coverage today, we're going to be showing you inaugural moments. And John Dancy will be our reporter on those, and we'll be back with more on Inauguration 85 after this.
New York City, 1789. Plagued by personal debt, George Washington had to borrow money to attend his own inaugural, held in Federal Hall, a former debtor's prison. The man who led his country in war was so nervous that his hand shook and his voice trembled as he read his inaugural address.
Have you driven a Ford? When was the last time you had the kind of car that brings the road alive? Have you driven a Ford? Then you don't know what you're missing. Have you driven a Ford? Driven a Ford? Have you driven a Ford lately?
From all over the world, crude oil comes to this Sun Company refinery where we make Sunoco products. Since Sun produces nearly 10 million gallons of gasoline a day, one of the most important jobs we have is safety, and not just at work. Many of us use our safety training as volunteer firemen in our community. All right, you guys, let's go. At Sun, we think putting our energy back into the community is just as important as getting it out.
Where there's sun, there's energy.
Do you want to buy a phone? It's cheaper than AT&T.
What you really need is cheap long distance.
And of course, our business systems are cheaper than AT&T.
Everyone's saying they're cheaper than AT&T, but nobody's saying they're better. All they can say is that they're cheaper, to which we say, you get what you pay for. Whether it's telephones, long distance, information systems, or computers, AT&T.
A bedtime story from Gaviscon Antacid. Once there was a guy who loved poker and pizza, and he was really good at eating pizza. But the stakes were high. Heartburn. Fortunately, there was help.
Gaviscon.
Gaviscon gives you fast relief from heartburn and acid indigestion, and it even works lying down.
See you and raise you, pepperoni.
Try Gaviscon. It even works lying down.
Back continuing the NBC coverage of Inauguration 1985, and the schedule, as you probably are very well aware now, has been changed a good deal as a result of the very cold weather that we have in Washington today. Temperature hovering around zero. That means that we have a wind chill factor of 14 degrees below zero. The inaugural ceremonies have been moved inside of the rotunda. That changes the security considerations. They had been expecting 140,000 people to attend the outdoor ceremonies, and they were going to put each of them through one of those metal detection devices, much like you have at an airport. So security considerations were going to be enormous today. They still are, of course. After all, this is the president who has been wounded in one assassination attempt, and the United States has been the target of terrorist attacks all around the world, including notably in Beirut, where the Marine headquarters was attacked. At any rate, the security considerations for this day now have been changed by the weather, and I have this report on all of the preparations that have taken place. For security people, the song is the same, but suddenly the lyrics are different. Preparations like this dress rehearsal for the swearing-in ceremony last week are now obsolete. Security plans for the inaugural parade were scrapped this morning. And the 3-inch thick bulletproof glass of the Capitol and the White House reviewing stand now becomes unnecessary. But the mission of security teams remains the same: to be sure that nothing happens to the president or any of the participants in today's inaugural events. Despite the change of plans, security at this 50th presidential inauguration remains a major concern. John Walker oversees the Secret Service.
It is more of a concern this year than in past years, and I think that's largely a function of the growth of terrorism, of incidents of terrorism in the world. Security generally is more of a concern today than it was 4 years ago.
This morning, the focus of security efforts is at the Capitol Rotunda, where the swearing-in will take place. And the Capitol Center, a sports arena outside of Washington, where inaugural officials are planning an alternative to the parade. At both locations, the security you don't see will be just as important as the security you can see. You will see lots of police and concrete barricades on the streets. You will not see the FBI's elite hostage rescue team. It's called HURT, but they won't be far away. You won't recognize members of the military's crack Delta Force of highly trained commandos, but they'll be around the capital city as well. And the FBI has been assembling a computerized video library of important buildings, pictures which allow agents to know exactly what they are getting into if they need to enter a building.
As I proceed, I can tell exactly how far it is to each wall. Now, the distance to the men's room from this location is 22 feet.
In the last few days in this town, people interested in the inauguration needed passes just to get their inauguration passes. 5 dozen for all of the event locations. Now, those credentials become a sort of security souvenir, like this description of security from President Truman's inaugural in 1949.
The Secret Service car follows directly behind the president and a little to the left to keep anyone from passing the president's car, and if anything should be coming from the other direction, to scoot around the president's car and smash into it if necessary. The big open Cadillac is made of heavily reinforced steel, carries Tommy guns, tear gas, and all sorts of equipment.
Tommy guns.
Yeah, Robert McCormick, that was.
That was
one
Robert
of the,
McCormick.
Distinguished NBC News correspondents in Washington in those days.
You know, Tom, as a sign of the times, the General Services Administration now has an architect on its staff here in Washington designing what are called aesthetically pleasing planters that can be filled with dynamite that can stop a 9-ton truck at 30 miles an hour. In other words, security has now entered architecture.
Yeah, it's a sad commentary that terrorists are, at any large event these days, the unexpected, uninvited, and unseen visitor that everyone has to anticipate. Well, there's a lighter side to all of this as well. And to cover the lighter side is the Pearl Mesta of NBC News, Douglas Kiker, who has thrown his body into parties in sacrifice for his profession, all the way from San Francisco to Dallas and now to Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, America's guest, Douglas Kiker, talking about the glitz around this inauguration. Douglas?
Thank you, Tom. 4 years ago, at Mr. Reagan's first inauguration, this VIP section behind me here looked like a mink farm. You never saw so many mink coats. Well, this inauguration, the second, is said to be a little more restrained, a little less glitzy. That may well be, but still, as you're going to see, it's pretty glitzy.
Neither cold nor Super Bowl nor food galore can keep Ronald Reagan's well-heeled admirers from their appointed rounds. While this mounted honor guard prepared for a parade which will not happen, the glittering entertainment goes on. They have come by Lear and by limo.
That's Mr. and Mrs. John Rollins. And then my chauffeur, Seymour.
Seymour?
Joseph Seymour.
Oh. All right.
Checked into the very best hotels.
Got a big night ahead of you?
Yes.
Big weekend, huh?
And they are determined to have a good time.
By accident, I found I feel like Cinderella going
You are Cinderella going to the ball.
Prince Charming.
I bet it's warmer up in
New Jersey. I bet it is.
The question is, what is the wind chill factor?
Sure, the bitter cold is a minor inconvenience.
I in a way wish they didn't cancel it.
Then you wouldn't have to make a decision about whether you're going or not.
Either here, they expect it to be 5 above.
But this weekend is theirs to be savored.
Fly me to the moon, let me play up there with those stars.
Remember Cinderella?
$1,000 plate, we heard that.
Well, here she is at a party. And Prince Charming? Well, what else on a glittering weekend?
Glitzy isn't necessarily tacky. Glitzy is just what happens when you get too many rich people who are accustomed to the best of everything in the same place at the same time. Tom?
Douglas, there's a rumor going around here that now that they're not going to use that podium for the president's speech or for the swearing-in ceremonies, you're going to have it converted to a duck blind for the flyover from the Potomac River. Anything to that?
At least 100,000 ducks fly away on the Chesapeake Bay when they see this hat coming, Tom.
I would think so, and a lot of other folks as well. Thanks very much, Douglas Kiker. By the way, one of the president's good friends from California, Holmes Tuttle, who has been an enormous success and a close political ally of the president, caught me last night and said, you all are making too much of the richness of this inauguration. A lot of us are self-made men, and this is just a tribute to the system in this country.
He's absolutely right.
Right.
The richest inaugural in history cost $16 million. That was an enormous amount. That was Reagan 1.
Right.
This one is the second most expensive at 11 or 12 million. That's Reagan 2. It is pretty expensive.
Well, the fact is that they say that this is these are people who have done well. They've gone from the West, many of them, places like Oklahoma out to California, found their fortune, and they want to pay tribute to the political system that lets them do that.
Yeah, but you know, Tom, the committee is in bad trouble because this was to have paid for itself with admission seats along the parade route. No parade means no revenue.
They got to
all that tickets. They've got to give the money back, and they're going to be in very, very serious trouble because of the weather. I mean, millions of dollars worth of trouble.
About $1 million altogether they're going to have to give back. Well, to give you an idea of what's going on here, Ridgewell's, the principal caterers, have been catering 75 parties with 50 trucks, 15,000 guests, 7,000 tomatoes, 4,000 eggs, 1,250 lobsters, 3,000 gallons of wine. We'll be back with more from Inauguration 85 after this.
(1809). After James Madison was sworn in, his wife, Dolly, staged the first American inaugural ball. She was magnificent in yellow gown and turban. He said, "I would much rather be in bed."
People get a lot of fish out of these waters, and Sun Company gets a lot of oil. Over 3 million barrels a year. We know that sea life was here long before we were. This is a drill. That's why we have practice drills like this. In case of a spill, our containment unit would quickly surround the oil and help prevent damage. At Sun, we think putting our energy back into the environment is as important as getting it out.
Where there's sun, there's energy.
Tell the truth. Is there a really great tasting decaffeinated coffee?
Oh, yes. Tasty.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
My congratulations, sir.
Ronald Reagan, President of the United States for a second term. It's now official. Today's
coffee with what is called the Joint Congressional Inaugural Escort Committee. A number of members of Congress from both parties have been up here exchanging pleasantries with the President and First Lady, and the President will be riding up Pennsylvania Avenue in his car with Senator Mathias of Maryland, who is the chairman of the Joint Congressional Inaugural Committee, and with House Speaker Tip O'Neill, who is perhaps Ronald Reagan's fiercest foe in this town, although not today. But if they get into something like Social Security, they could have a pretty interesting conversation during the few moments it will take to go from the White House up to the Capitol. You may have noticed Mrs. Reagan is wearing an electric blue coat and hat today, and there is a reason that she chose that color. It's because when NBC was projecting states for her husband on election night, we lit the states up on our electoral map as blue. By the end of the night, of course, the whole country except Minnesota and D.C. were electric blue, and that had become her new favorite color. This is a new presidential limousine that just in the last year that they have unveiled, and it has a new high top, which makes it easier for people on the sides to see the president. There's no sliding roof, unlike earlier presidential limousines, which means that the president will make the trip up and down Pennsylvania Avenue today completely unclosed, which is unusual. I think it costs, according to some estimates, about $250,000, and it is outfitted with thick glass and thick steel plate. It's like a Sherman tank. Today's trip up the avenue has none of the drama of 1981 or earlier inaugurals where there was a switch of power. For instance, 4 years ago when the Reagans and the Carters came out and obviously were none too comfortable with each other. This time it's really just the Reagans in their limousine going up Pennsylvania Avenue, although of course it's still a very special trip. You can see them going up Pennsylvania Avenue, the streets which should have been filled with thousands of people on those stands, completely deserted because the parade has been called off. And everyone is doing what you folks are at home watching it on TV.
You're seeing a quick frozen city, Chris Wallace. That's keeping everyone inside. And for security reasons, of course, the Secret Service announced to people who are expecting to have parties along the route that they ought not to have anyone appear suddenly or unexpectedly at a window. Security's been very tight. Manhole covers have been welded down on Pennsylvania Avenue.
They were either going to remove mailboxes or seal them shut too, so nobody could place a time bomb in them. You know, this has just been a burgeoning thing, obviously starting with the presidential assassination attempt in 1981, and then especially with all of the terrorist attacks overseas in Lebanon and in the Middle East. And during the 1984 campaign, you could just see the security precautions increasing.
Chris, there was some talk that the president may change his route today, but in fact it looks like he's going up Pennsylvania Avenue as expected, where he'll go to the Capitol, and there will be a change then in the scheduling there. He had been expected to be in a small holding room, then walk beneath the rotunda out onto that platform that has been erected on the west front of the Capitol, which shows you that magnificent view, the Washington Monument, the entire ellipse area looking west to his homeland, really, California. But now the ceremonies will take place instead in the rotunda, the great rotunda of the Capitol. There will be a luncheon afterward, just off the rotunda, and representative Americans have been invited to that luncheon, including a truck driver and a fireman and a man who's a narcotics officer, and he has to appear undercover. He's not been consenting to interviews in which his face can be shown.
Tom?
Yes, Chris.
Well, of course, as you know, 4 years ago, Ronald Reagan was the first president to hold his swearing in on the west front of the Capitol, and I think it meant a lot to him as a Westerner. It also is a much more picturesque setting. In fact, in the past, presidents had their swearing-ins on the east front, which basically overlooked a parking lot. And finally, someone got the smart idea to do it on the west front, which overlooks the mall here in Washington, and all of the magnificent monuments. You can see the Smithsonian institutions on the right and the left, and down, of course, at the end of the mall, the Lincoln and Jefferson memorials. So it had become, it was, I think, perhaps fitting that a Westerner should be the first person to be sworn in on the western front. And they certainly were looking forward to doing it again, and the months of preparation for that. A whole facelifting, cleaning of the west front of the Capitol, and of course, because of the weather, all that changes overnight.
Not only a Westerner, Chris, but a budget cutter. It costs less to build the stands on the west front of the Capitol than it does on the east because you can put in portable seats.
Pennsylvania Avenue has been greatly changed since John Kennedy rode down this avenue in 1961, and he was appalled by the condition of many of the buildings along the way. And among other things, the National Trust for Historic Preservation has been working at saving the buildings, refurbishing many of them. The old Willard Hotel, where President Lincoln stayed the night before his inauguration, has been saved now and rehabilitated. Steve Delaney is along that route out there in the cold. Steve?
Should have been an hour or so from now if he were going to have his inaugural here. I can see the leading cars in the motorcade kind of making that left turn to get them onto Constitution Avenue and come up around the north side of the Capitol. It must be kind of sad for the president to sit in that car and watch nobody visible along the sidewalks. Once they moved everything inside, there's only 30 or 40 people standing here watching that parade go by. And most of them are doing just what I am, talking about it and anticipating the ceremonies will be inside. Once the motorcade gets up around the Senate side of the Capitol, he'll pull up to a doorway on the east side, the traditional side of these things, and he'll be seen there in just a moment or two. Tom?
Thank you, Steve. There's the Capitol now coming into view. He arrives, as we say, on the east front, where there is enormous parking and very restricted parking at that. Any number of decals are necessary to have a place there except for the President of the United States, who arrives traditionally by this route for State of the Union addresses, for inaugural ceremonies, for rare appearances at Congress.
The President's limousine is now just pulling up on the east front of the Capitol. It will stop in front of what is called the Law Library door. There, the President will step out, be greeted. His security limousine just pulling up behind it. Security is very tight here. There are no crowds. There are only security men, photographers, a few reporters standing around as the President steps out of the limousine. House Speaker O'Neill getting out. On the other side, Senator Mathias, and there's the President. Helping Mrs. Reagan from the car. There are no ceremonies planned here, no crowds to greet him, no one to cheer. The President will simply walk inside to begin the ceremonies here at the Capitol. The President now going in a door on the first floor of the Capitol building. Just behind him, walking up the steps here and toward the Capitol, Vice President Bush, accompanied by Senate Majority Leader Dole and House Minority Leader. Yes, sir, Mr. Vice President, how are you doing?
Well, feel pretty good. I'm just sorry that a lot of people are going to miss the festivities, but Anyway, here we are. Glad to be here.
The Vice President saying he's sorry that so many people are going to miss the festivities along the parade route as he walks indoors. But the ceremonies doubtless will go on just the same.
Thank you very much, Mike. What is your name?
The Vice President stopping just for a moment to give the photographers a chance at a quick picture. Then he goes in the law library door as well.
Well, the official party now has arrived about 5 minutes ahead of schedule, incidentally. They may have gone more rapidly, more swiftly up Pennsylvania Avenue and Constitution Avenue because there were no crowds. The President and the Vice President and the assembled members of their party will be in a holding room for a time, and then they will go into the rotunda for the ceremonies. We'll have complete coverage, of course, all afternoon here on NBC, and we'll continue that coverage after this.
NBC News presidential inauguration coverage is being sponsored in part by the Sun Company, where there's sun, there's energy, and by Ford and your local Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
I'm Tom Brokaw here with John Chancellor in the NBC News Inauguration 85 set, and the President and the Vice President and the members of their party now are at the Capitol, having left the White House today, and they are there in a holding room. Very shortly they will go from there, after about a 10 or 12-minute wait, to the Great Rotunda, because the ceremonies have been moved inside because of the bitter cold temperature. Actually, it's getting to be downright balmy, John. It's up to 5 degrees above zero.
What's the wind chill?
And the wind chill is only 15 below at this point. Dangerous conditions in Washington, D.C. Therefore, the parade was canceled, and the ceremonies that were to be outside the Capitol now have been moved inside the Capitol. This is going to change a lot of things. Of course, the souvenirs are going to, we'll have to see what the value is for a ticket that was not used on the only time they had to cancel and move inside and so on. This is a first-day cover that the post office issues, of course. We want to show you something. That is the President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, and we think this is supposed to be George Bush, but we believe it's John Chancellor, in fact.
If nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve.
Well, we've sent out to order all of these that we can get our hands on. John Chancellor, first-day cover. Emery King has been keeping track of all of the souvenirs that have been available to people who've been coming to Washington for this inaugural weekend, and he has this report on them. Emery?
Inaugural souvenirs in Washington are selling as fast as a hit tune.
We want one that sings.
I'll take 10.
From $1 bumper stickers to $12 musical buttons. And for the more serious, the inaugural committee has put out an official line of souvenirs, including a patriotic jar of red, white, and blue jelly beans, a set of personalized inaugural license plates, a cut crystal decorator piece with lid, a Ronald Reagan Royal Dalton mug, a Nancy Reagan bisque porcelain rose, a white bisque porcelain soaring eagle, and a hand-painted American presidential eagle. $1,750. Will people really spend that much money for an eagle?
Yes. 25 people have already.
Most of the official inaugural committee items are sold in department stores.
God must have been sitting on my shoulder.
And committee officials expect even greater sales after the inauguration through mail orders.
American buttons, what kind you like, man?
But street vendors are also making money, selling items the committee hasn't approved.
I've always made out better this way than I have working with the committee.
So after looking at all of these wonderful souvenirs, I've decided that a $1,750 eagle is just a little bit too expensive for my tastes. And some of these other items, like inaugural hats and flashing buttons that sing the Star-Spangled Banner, just really aren't my style. I've decided that the ones you eat are the ones for me, so I'm going to go for the President's lunch. It's a candy bar, and it's a real bargain at $1.60.
Well, there will be no people along the parade route today to buy from all of those vendors who expect to make big dough, and that's too bad for them as well.
Frozen out.
Frozen out indeed. The president and the vice president at the Capitol right now in a holding room on the east side of the Capitol, waiting to go into the rotunda. There is the door of the holding room. They will go from there up 2 floors into the rotunda itself. We can show you through the magic of television and my John Madden-like device the Capitol and the floor plan. Here is the first floor. And the president entered right here, came in this way, and he's in this holding room here. He'll then go up 2 floors, and eventually he'll end up in this area right in here for the ceremonies. He was originally scheduled, of course, to go out here. That now all has been canceled, of course, because of the inclement weather in Washington, D.C. 140,000 people. Many of them, I expect, were not disappointed. I talked to a couple of the president's California friends yesterday, and they were saying, thank God he made that decision. I wasn't going to sit out there. And health would have been endangered for a lot of us.
A lot of people come here for the parties. There will be 9 or 10 galas tonight. Somebody added it up. If you and your wife came to the inauguration here and stayed in a medium-priced hotel, it would be about $3,000, not counting your airfare.
Pretty expensive. All the limousines in town were sold out, even though for a 4-day period, $2,400 inclusive. That's tip and chauffeur. And there wasn't a car available. Rent-a-wreck, I'm even told. The rent-a-car outfit was down to its last automobile as well.
Democratic inauguration.
Well, they may be, but Republicans have to use transportation wherever and whenever they can. And the ceremonies that we expected to see today, of course, have been changed as a result of all of this. The traditional wardrobes of inaugurals, black tie and tails and evening gowns, now have been replaced. The symbols instead are long johns and stocking caps, I would think, for inauguration 1985. There will be this luncheon that will occur short. Well, let's go to the rotunda now, where, as you can see, people are standing. Mrs. Reagan is arriving with Mrs. Bush, both dressed in blue today. Mrs. Reagan in an outfit designed by Adolfo. Mrs. Bush, as I recall, is in an outfit designed by Bill Blass. 2 well-known American fashion designers. That gets an awful lot of attention on these occasions as well. There are 8 paintings in the rotunda altogether. The baptism of Pocahontas at Jamestown, for example, that's one of them. We have books for these that we've been scrambling. The Declaration of, the signing of the Declaration of Independence at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the famous John Trumbull painting. Those are the great oil paintings that you'll be seeing in the background there. And then above that are different friezes of historic events down through times. John?
You know, the presidents, when they take the oath these days, although Reagan wore a morning outfit the last time, but tend to look as though they work for IBM. In 1793, when George Washington appeared for his second inaugural, he was dressed as follows: a black velvet suit trimmed with lace, a white satin vest, black hose and shoes with diamond knee buckles and diamond shoe buckles, yellow kid gloves, a dress sword with a jeweled sheath, and a cocked hat. Now that's dressing for your second inaugural.
I saw you going out of the hotel in that very outfit last night.
If it was good enough for George, it's good enough for me.
Vice President George Bush being accompanied now to the rotunda, where he too will be sworn in for a second time. The really formal and official ceremonies took place yesterday at the White House. Those are the ones that count. Today is principally for people who are looking in. It is traditional for presidents to be sworn in on January 20th, before that on March 4th. But when those dates fall on Sundays, the presidents have moved them to another day, Monday. And in this case, not only do we have the Sabbath to deal with, but of course, Super Bowl last night. The president flipped the coin electronically from the White House. So there is a real confluence of sports and television and politics coming together here in the nation's capital in 1985, January 21st this day, John.
Yes, Monroe decided to wait a day so the United States was without a president. So did Zachary Taylor. He waited a day. Since then, when it's happened on a Sunday, they've all taken the oath just to be safe.
That's right. And there was some dispute yesterday about whether or not the White House would let us into the ceremonies, but then, in fact, they decided that for in the interest of history that they would do that, and I would hope that there would be more of that kind of spirit that would prevail in Washington, because after all, we are now compiling at the same time a written history of this republic. We are compiling, if you will, an electronic videotape history, so that future generations of students and others can go back and have a look for the feel of it. Wouldn't it be marvelous, for example, to have a videotape of George Washington and those ceremonies? When he left Mount Vernon, by the way, to go to New York to be inaugurated the first time, he could barely get through Washington and Georgetown. They kept having parties at every tavern along the way, and finally, after 2 days of that, he said no more stopping at the taverns. There was such celebration with gusto. The President of the United States, accompanied on his right by Senator McMathias, on his left by the Speaker of the House, Thomas P. Tip O'Neill. So the ceremonies now begin. The President going up 2 floors to the rotunda, and Roger Mudd is in the rotunda, where we can hear him if we can't see him. Roger?
Tom, when you take a huge rotunda and put into it the House and the Senate and the diplomatic corps, and then you add a Marine Corps band, you've got a very tight-knit group. The great losers in the rearrangement of plans today were the wives. There are no diplomatic wives and no governor's wives, although a few have managed to squeeze in. 400 have jammed into this rotunda. And they have seen in the last few minutes the arrival of the Chief Justice and Mrs. Berger, Vice President and Mrs. Bush. Mrs. Reagan came in almost unannounced from the Senate side, had literally to squeeze her way through a crowd of congressmen and senators, but you could see her easily because of that bright royal blue outfit she has on. Mrs. Bush has a powder blue. They've obviously coordinated that beforehand, but they are now in place, and in a moment or two, we'll get the President of the United States.
Roger, that painting that we see in the background is called The Embarkation of the Pilgrims at Delfthaven, Holland, July 22nd, 1620, just so people are wondering at home. And we'll be seeing more of those paintings because they are situated around the rotunda.
Well, there are paintings. There is the Declaration of Independence. There's the surrender of Burgoyne, the surrender of Cornwallis. There is the signing of the ratification of the Constitution. There is the blessing of Pocahontas. And there is the only thing we don't have, Tom, is a contemporary painting, and they've deliberately kept it that way. In addition, there are a few pieces of statuary in the hall.
Now the President enters through the far door, as you can see. Forced to stand for this occasion.
Right shoulder. Pump.
Backed by members of his cabinet and some of their wives.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, fellow citizens, we celebrate today the 50th inauguration of a President and Vice President of the United States, and the beginning of a presidential term that brings us to the threshold of the 3rd century of American constitutional government. I will ask the Reverend Timothy S. Healy, President of Georgetown University, to offer the invocation.
Let us offer this prayer for the President and Vice President and their families, for the people and government of these United States, for men and women of goodwill everywhere, captive and free, who watch us today. Please join me in saying the words our Lord taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Miss Jessie Norman will now sing Simple Gifts, one of the songs in Aaron Copland's Old American Songs.
Tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free, tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delights. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. Tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free, tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delights. Tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free, tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and
Once again, Senator Mathias is in charge of the arrangements for Congress.
I now ask Rabbi Alfred Gottschalk, president of Hebrew Union College of Cincinnati, to offer a prayer.
We, the people, turn to you, O God, in prayer. We have come again to this place which stirs our hearts to reaffirm the highest ideals of our nation. The sacred oaths about to be pronounced in your name reflect the awesome responsibilities entrusted to our President and Vice President by the American people. May you, who are the Rock of Ages, guide them in protecting the Constitution of our beloved Commonwealth, founded in faith, which ensures unity without uniformity. Sustain them, O God, as they advance the American way, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to malevolence no hope. O source of all life, enshrine in their hearts the knowledge that all are created in your image, and that life, your gift to us, is sacred. Inspire our leaders to defeat hunger and hurt, to promote compassion, and to find successful ways to assure the weak their share of America's promise. In humility we pray that this opportunity for renewal will advance reconciliation in the family of nations, guaranteeing peace in our world and tranquility in the farthest reaches of our universe. May those who follow us, our children and our children's children, bless our President and Vice President, their families and all those associated with them in government, and may all remember this time and this administration as that in which their future was made secure. O God, may you who makes peace in high places help us here on earth to find the way to peace. Blessed are you, O God, Oseh HaShalom, granter of peace. Amen.
Justice Potter Stewart will administer the oath of office to the Vice President.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this oath, this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
That I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I am about to enter.
So help you God.
So help me God.
The University of Maryland Chorus, under the direction of Dr. Paul Traver, will now sing the first section of Randall Thompson's Testament of Freedom.
At the same time,
First, the Maryland Chorus consists of faculty members and community members and alums as well. And, of course, Maryland is the home state of this man, Senator Mathias, who is in charge of the congressional arrangements.
I will now ask the President's own pastor, the Reverend Don Mumaw of Bel Air Presbyterian Church, to offer a prayer.
Let us all unite in prayer. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Come, Father, with cleansing power and remove all things from us that would impede your purpose and thwart your plan. Forgive our pride and arrogance before each other and other nations of the world. May we, with godly grace, weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who work for a just and free world. Grant us, O Father, the courage and the compassion to stand in solidarity with the poor, the needy, the dispossessed, and the disadvantaged. May the President and Vice President of these United States and all who stand with him in his desire for peace receive first the peace of Christ, and in all things seek first not the kingdom of plenty or the kingdom of political superiority, but may they seek humbly first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. In the name of the King, even Jesus Christ our Lord, we pray. Amen. Amen.
The Chief Justice will now administer the oath to the President.
"35 words in all, an oath that Abraham Lincoln said is registered in heaven. An oath the President took yesterday, which made him officially President of the United States for another term.
You'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will to the best of my ability.
Will to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, sir.
They may have to rearrange things. You cannot take away from the majesty of that simple oath and the power of that great office. The 21-gun salute outside, and really the dignity of the buildings in Washington and the memorials that you'll see in the background. In this hastily arranged setting, just between the President and Mrs. Reagan in the background with the glasses and the gray hair is his longtime friend, Jimmy Stewart, as you can see there. And other close friends who have been assembled along with members of Congress and the Senate. And now the inaugural address by the President.
Senator Mathias, Chief Justice Berger, Vice President Bush, Speaker O'Neill, Senator Dole, Reverend clergy, and members of my family and friends, and my fellow citizens, this day has been made brighter with the presence here of one who for a time has been absent. Senator John Stennis, God bless you and welcome back.
Senator Stennis has recently undergone...
There is, however, one who is not with us today. Representative Gillis Long of Louisiana left us last night, and I wonder if we could all join in a moment of silent prayer. There are no words adequate to express my thanks for the great honor that you've bestowed on me. I'll do my utmost to be deserving of your trust. This is, as Senator Mathias told us, the 50th time that we, the people, have celebrated this historic occasion. When the first president, George Washington, placed his hand upon the Bible, he stood less than a single day's journey by horseback from raw, untamed wilderness. There were 4 million Americans in a union of 13 states. Today, we are 60 times as many in a union of 50 states. We've lighted the world with our inventions, gone to the aid of mankind wherever in the world there was a cry for help, journeyed to the moon and safely returned. So much has changed, and yet we stand together as we did 2 centuries ago. When I took this oath 4 years ago, I did so in a time of economic stress. Voices were raised saying that we had to look to our past for the greatness and glory. But we, the present-day Americans, are not given to looking backward. In this blessed land, there is always a better tomorrow. 4 years ago, I spoke to you of a new beginning, and we have accomplished that. But in another sense, our new beginning is a continuation of that beginning created 2 centuries ago, when, for the first time in history, government, the people said, was not our master, it is our servant. Its only power, that which we, the people, allow it to have. That system has never failed us, but for a time, we failed the system. We asked things of government that government was not equipped to give. We yielded authority to the national government that properly belonged to states or to local governments or to the people themselves. We allowed taxes and inflation to rob us of our earnings and savings and watched the great industrial machine that had made us the most productive people on earth slow down and the number of unemployed increase. By 1980, we knew it was time to renew our faith, to strive with all our strength toward the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with an orderly society. We believed then and now there are no limits to growth and human progress when men and women are free to follow their dreams. And we were right. And we were right to believe that. Tax rates have been reduced, inflation cut dramatically, and more people are employed than ever before in our history. We are creating a nation once again, vibrant, robust, and alive. But there are many mountains yet to climb. We will not rest until every American enjoys the fullness of freedom, dignity, and opportunity as our birthright. It is our birthright as citizens of this great republic. And if we meet this challenge, these will be years when Americans have restored their confidence and tradition of progress, when our values of faith, family, work, and neighborhood were restated for a modern age, when our economy was finally freed from government's grip, when we made sincere efforts at meaningful arms reductions and by rebuilding our defenses, our economy, and developing new technologies, helped preserve peace in a troubled world. When America courageously supported the struggle for individual liberty, self-government, and free enterprise throughout the world, and turned the tide of history away from totalitarian darkness and into the warm sunlight of human freedom. My fellow citizens, our nation is poised for greatness. We must do what we know is right and do it with all our might. Let history say of us, these were golden years when the American Revolution was reborn, when freedom gained new life and America reached for her best. Our two-party system has served us, I should say, well over the years, but never better than in those times of great challenge when we came together not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans united in a common cause. Two of our founding fathers, a Boston lawyer named Adams and a Virginia planter named Jefferson, members of that remarkable group who met in Independence Hall and dared to think they could start the world over again, left us an important lesson. They had become, in the years then in government, bitter political rivals in the presidential election of 1800. And then years later, when both were retired and age had softened their anger, they began to speak to each other again through letters. A bond was reestablished between those two who had helped create this government of ours. In 1826, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, they both died. They died on the same day, within a few hours of each other, and that day was the 4th of July. In one of those letters exchanged in the sunset of their lives, Jefferson wrote, "It carries me back to the times when, beset with difficulties and dangers, we were fellow laborers in the same cause, struggling for what is most valuable to man, his right of self-government, laboring always at the same oar, with some wave ever ahead threatening to overwhelm us, and yet passing harmless, we rode through the storm with heart and hand." Well, with heart and hand, let us stand as one today. One people under God, determined that our future shall be worthy of our past. As we do, we must not repeat the well-intentioned errors of our past. We must never again abuse the trust of working men and women by sending their earnings on a futile chase after the spiraling demands of a bloated federal establishment. You elected us in 1980 to end this prescription for disaster, and I don't believe you re-elected us in 1984 to reverse course. At the heart of our efforts is one idea vindicated by 25 straight months of economic growth. Freedom and incentives unleash the drive and entrepreneurial genius that are the core of human progress. We have begun to increase the rewards for work, savings, and investment, reduce the increase in the cost and size of government and its interference in people's lives. We must simplify our tax system, make it more fair, and bring the rates down for all who work and earn. We must think anew and move with a new boldness so every American who seeks work can find work, so the least among us shall have an equal chance to achieve the greatest things, to be heroes who heal our sick, feed the hungry, protect peace among nations, and leave this world a better place. The time has come for a new American emancipation, a great national drive to tear down economic barriers and liberate the spirit of enterprise in the most distressed areas of our country. My friends, together we can do this, and do it we must, so help me God. From new freedom will spring new opportunities for growth, a more productive, fulfilled, and united people, and a stronger America. An America that will lead the technological revolution and also open its mind and heart and soul to the treasures of literature, music, and poetry, and the values of faith, courage, and love. A dynamic economy with more citizens working and paying taxes will be our strongest tool to bring down budget deficits. But an almost unbroken 50 years of deficit spending has finally brought us to a time of reckoning. We've come to a turning point, a moment for hard decisions. I have asked the cabinet and my staff a question, and now I put the same question to all of you. If not us, who? And if not now, when? It must be done by all of us. going forward with a program aimed at reaching a balanced budget, we can then begin reducing the national debt. I will shortly submit a budget to the Congress aimed at freezing government program spending for the next year. Beyond this, we must take further steps to permanently control government's power to tax and spend. We must act now to protect future generations from government's desire to spend its citizens' money and tax them into servitude when the bills come due. Let us make it unconstitutional for the federal government to spend more than the federal government takes in. We have already started returning to the people and to state and local governments responsibilities better handled by them. Now, there is a place for the federal government in matters of social compassion, but our fundamental goals must be to reduce dependency and upgrade the dignity of those who are infirm or disadvantaged. And here, a growing economy and support from family and community offer our best chance for a society where compassion is a way of life, where the old and infirm are cared for, the young and, yes, the unborn protected, and the unfortunate looked after and made self-sufficient. Now, there is another area where the federal government can play a part. As an older American, I remember a time when people of different race, creed, or ethnic origin in our land found hatred and prejudice installed in social custom and, yes, in law. There's no story more heartening in our history than the progress that we've made toward the brotherhood of man that God intended for us. Let us resolve there will be no turning back or hesitation on the road to an America rich in dignity and abundant with opportunity for all our citizens. Let us resolve that we, the people, will build an American opportunity society in which all of us, white and black, rich and poor, young and old, will go forward together, arm in arm. Again, let us remember that though our heritage is one of bloodlines from every corner of the earth, we are all Americans pledged to carry on this last best hope of man on earth. I've spoken of our domestic goals and the limitations we should put on our national government. Now let me turn to a task that is the primary responsibility of national government, the safety and security of our people. Today we utter no prayer more fervently than the ancient prayer for peace on earth. Yet history has shown that peace does not come, nor will our freedom be preserved by goodwill alone. There are those in the world who scorn our vision of human dignity and freedom. One nation, the Soviet Union, has conducted the greatest military buildup in the history of man, building arsenals of awesome offensive weapons. We've made progress in restoring our defense capability, but much remains to be done. There must be no wavering by us, nor any doubts by others, that America will meet her responsibilities to remain free, secure, and at peace. There is only one way safely and legitimately to reduce the cost of national security, and that is to reduce the need for it. And this we're trying to do in negotiations with the Soviet Union. We're not just discussing limits on a further increase of nuclear weapons. We seek instead to reduce their number. We seek the total elimination one day of nuclear weapons from the face of the earth. Now, for decades, we and the Soviets have lived under the threat of mutual assured destruction. If either resorted to the use of nuclear weapons, the other could retaliate and destroy the one who had started it. Is there either logic or morality in believing that if one side threatens to kill tens of millions of our people, our only recourse is to threaten killing tens of millions of theirs? I have approved a research program to find, if we can, a security shield that will destroy nuclear missiles before they reach their target. It wouldn't kill people. It would destroy weapons. It wouldn't militarize space. It would help demilitarize the arsenals of Earth. It would render nuclear weapons obsolete. We will meet with the Soviets hoping that we can agree on a way to rid the world of the threat of nuclear destruction. We strive for peace and security, heartened by the changes all around us. Since the turn of the century, the number of democracies in the world has grown fourfold. Human freedom is on the march, and nowhere more so than in our own hemisphere. Freedom is one of the deepest and noblest aspirations of the human spirit. People worldwide hunger for the right of self-determination, for those inalienable rights that make for human dignity and progress. America must remain freedom's staunchest friend, for freedom is our best ally. And it is the world's only hope to conquer poverty and preserve peace. Every blow we inflict against poverty will be a blow against its dark allies of oppression and war. Every victory for human freedom will be a victory for world peace. So we go forward today, a nation still mighty in its youth and powerful in its purpose. With our alliances strengthened, with our economy leading the world to a new age of economic expansion, we look to a future rich in possibilities. And all of this is because we worked and acted together, not as members of political parties, but as Americans. My friends, we live in a world that's lit by lightning. So much is changing and will change, but so much endures and transcends time. History is a ribbon, always unfurling. History is a journey. And as we continue our journey, we think of those who traveled before us. We stand again at the steps of this symbol of our democracy, or we would have been standing at the steps if it hadn't gotten so cold. Now we're standing inside this symbol of our democracy. And we see and hear again the echoes of our past. A general falls to his knees in the hard snow of Valley Forge. A lonely president paces the darkened halls and ponders his struggle to preserve the Union. The men of the Alamo call out encouragement to each other. A settler pushes west and sings a song, and the song echoes out forever and fills the unknowing air. It is the American sound. It is hopeful, big-hearted, idealistic, daring, decent, and fair. That's our heritage. That's our song. We sing it still. For all our problems, our differences, we are together as of old. We raise our voices to the God who is the author of this most tender music. And may he continue to hold us close as we fill the world with our sound in unity, affection, and love. One people, under God, dedicated to the dream of freedom that he has placed in the human heart, called upon now to pass that dream on to a waiting and a hopeful world. God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
President Ronald Wilson Reagan, 40th President of the United States, his inaugural address in the rotunda of the Capitol building, a reaffirmation of the philosophy that elected him twice governor of California, now twice President of the United States. A tribute to free enterprise, a call for economic freedom, for less government, a statement about abortion, which he opposes. A strong statement in behalf of the Strategic Defense Initiative, the so-called Star Wars defense that he would like to have installed as part of the nuclear arms equation.
I will ask the Reverend Peter Gomes, minister in the Memorial Church at Harvard University, to pronounce the benediction. Following the benediction, these proceedings will be concluded by the playing of the national anthem by the Marine Corps Band.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who hast given us this good land for our heritage, we humbly beseech thee that we may always prove ourselves a people mindful of thy favor and glad to do thy will. Bless our land with honorable industry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from discord, violence, and confusion, and the frailty of our own hearts. Defend our liberties, preserve our unity, and fashion into one united people the multitudes brought hither out of many kindreds and tongues. Endue with the spirit of wisdom, prudence, and fortitude the President and the Vice President of these United States, and all those to whom is entrusted the authority of government, to the end that justice and peace may flourish at home and abroad. Make us, with them, equal to our high trusts, reverent in the use of freedom, just in the exercise of power, generous in the protection of weakness. May wisdom and compassion be the stability of our times and our deepest trust in thee, in whom we live and move and have our being. Unto thee, O Lord, we ascribe all honor and glory, and in thanksgiving and in hope, we commend now to thy eternal protection ourselves, our nation, and our world. Amen.
Senator Mathias asking the President a question about the next arrangements. They had an elaborate game plan, if we can borrow the football vernacular, for this weekend, of course, and now it's a little bit like a touch football game in the park. You're going to have to make it up as they go along, huddling along the way. This is the photo opportunity of the two families, President and Mrs. Reagan, Vice President and Mrs. Bush.
Tom, there's a nice sense of improvisation about the whole thing. When you look at the picture of all the people in that whole room, it looks like one of the early 19th century paintings.
It does look like a Trumbull painting itself. Two exceptional marriages there on that platform as well. They're devoted to each other, the Bushes and the Reagans. And of course, that's at the core of their political philosophy as well, the strength of the family and hard work. Notice the president's son-in-law, Dennis Revelle, brought his own camera, for example, and was taking pictures in there, so there's a kind of family outing about it. Something to be said for it. And we were told that they will only have 400 in there, John. Somehow they managed to squeeze in 1,000. There are a lot of folks in there, like Bill Buckley, who's an old friend of the president's, who's there. Holmes Tuttle from California. Jimmy Stewart is there. Wives of members of the cabinet, like Mrs. Smith, the wife, Jean Smith, who's the wife of the Attorney General. Mrs. Weinberger, the wife of the Defense Secretary. Roger Mudd at the Rotunda.
Tom, Vice President George Bush has just come over to shake hands with John Stennis, who was specially recognized by the president. As you reported, he'd had his leg amputated several months ago, now on the way to recovery now. So Vice President Bush, Mrs. Bush, President, and Mrs. Reagan on the way out, waving to a crowd that has now jumped up on the various pieces of statuary in the hall. The speech was had a more intimate quality than it would have had out on the West Front, and when the president began, it was almost in a subdued tone. He got his biggest explosion of applause when he called for a constitutional amendment that would mandate a balanced budget. At least the biggest burst of applause came from the Republican side.
Yeah, that's a tough one, though, don't you think, Roger, to get that through?
I think it's tough. It's easy to applaud, but tough to... easy to applaud, probably a little tougher to vote for, and I think almost impossible to clear the Congress. The president laid out 4 or 5 broad themes. One, a freeze on defense spending, or on the whole budgetary outlook. Also, the promise, he said, of total elimination of nuclear weapons one day. When you say one day, that puts an open-ended commitment. That's a good applause line and a worthy goal as he approaches this last term. Now, I suppose the most striking phrase of the speech was a sentence toward the end when he was trying to impress his audience at how rapidly things moved and how much progress had been made. He said, "The world is lit by lightning." We are unable, he said, to keep up with the speed of things. So we're now in the middle of a swirling rotunda here with the Marine Corps band playing harmonious music. Lots of handshaking, lots of backslapping. The governors are here. The new members of the Senate are here. The tall ones you can spot. On one side, you have the new senator from West Virginia, Senator Rockefeller. Next to him, Lowell Weicker. And close by is the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Mr. Volcker. You have 3 starting...
Well, we may have lost Roger. This has been patched up for everybody in a hurry here. We could not get a camera to him because these are pool arrangements of the 3 networks are showing any of these cameras. And he is just inside the rotunda. We didn't know whether we would even get to hear from him. We'll be back with more coverage of all of this on NBC. John Chancellor, Tom Brokaw, the fully assembled NBC News team, including Roger Mudd and others. We'll be back, as I say, after this.
1897. William McKinley was the first president-elect to be protected by a
There have been some other Americans invited to this as well. We'll be talking about them later on. This is a very select group of people, of course, who have been invited here for a 3-course luncheon, and I always wonder why they go to such great difficulty. We have hot mousse of sole, sautéed spinach, medallions of veal, glazed vegetables, wild rice and chestnuts, a cold praline soufflé, California wine, of course, California Cabernet and California Chardonnay, California champagne.
It's not exactly macaroni and cheese.
No,
Tom.
it isn't exactly, and I can't imagine that they eat more than maybe a forkful of each course, if that much at all, but it is part of the tradition, of course, that we go through, and it's something that reaches back to French history rather than American history.
There are... the president will probably respond to Senator Mathias's toast at the end, and it was interesting how 4 years is a long time ago. And we cast our minds back to 1980 and remember what it was then. The president said the following at the end of the lunch at the 1981 luncheon. He said, "With thanks to Almighty God, I have been given a tagline, the get-off line everyone wants at the end of a toast or speech." And then the president said, "Some 30 minutes ago, the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and now are free of Iran. We can all drink to this one."
Right. That was the beginning of the Reagan administration. In this speech, the most significant thing that he had to say, probably from a policy point of view, is that he's going to submit a budget, as a lot of people suspected that he might, that will call for a budgetary freeze or free spending at the current levels. If they really wanted to have a freeze on a day like today, they could appoint a bipartisan committee of some kind, take that huge budget document and stand outside for about 30 seconds, and that would freeze it in place, as a matter of fact. But that is the first clue from the president's mouth that this is what, in fact, he hopes that he'll be able to do, and they think that they can save, what is it, $50 billion by doing
Well,
that?
it's down to 50 now. It was 100 before. Let us remind our audience of what the president did again. In the President's room of the Senate in 1981, after the previous inauguration, Mr. Reagan signed an executive order freezing federal hiring, he said, to control the growth of the federal government. Well, they have controlled the rate of increase of the federal government, but domestic spending in this country in 1980 was $400 billion. The estimate for 1985 is $575 billion. Military spending was $130 billion in 1980. It is estimated in 85 to be $245 billion. So controlling the growth of the federal government has been as difficult for Mr. Reagan as it has been for many presidents in the past. But his first act as president, up on the Hill, in the Senate, in the president's room of the Senate, an executive order freezing federal hiring.
And as a matter of fact, the percentage of the federal government of the GNP has gone up under President Reagan as well. One of those who is watching all of this very carefully from his seat as the senior senator from the state of New York is Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He's at the Capitol now with Roger Mudd, and they're standing by. Roger's back at his post in Bob Dole's office. Roger, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Tom. Senator, you're the first Democrat I've talked to since the speech. In fact, you're the first politician since the speech. Just tell me what you thought of the speech, number one.
Well, I agreed with your term that it was subdued. The president was not quite up the way he almost always is for such occasions. Subdued a bit by the experience of his first term, which is going to dominate his second. The two basic facts, which is that public finances are in awful shape, and he knows it. He has to somehow get them under control, and they've gone out of control in his first term. The second is that we are at something of swords points with the Soviets. We do have to get our arms relationships under control. He is very deeply committed to the idea of building a shield against ballistic missiles. The
Star Wars?
Star Wars. He spoke about it with great conviction. He would find most of us in the Senate are saying, but Chief, the cruise missile makes all that different. It changes everything. Warheads don't come in from outer space. They come in under the Brooklyn Bridge. So we'll have to watch that. But I took it to be a conciliatory speech, and certainly not a partisan one.
Did it lay out a plan of action for you as a member of the opposition? Do you know what to expect?
Well, he said that he's going to freeze. Right. Does that mean he will freeze defense spending? I think he meant... I don't think he meant that. We can ask him. Huh? What he did say is, after 4 years of government, it is more complicated, isn't it?
That was his message that came through to you.
More complicated and a little bit less fun. But still, it was like, it's his day, and we're all for him. We're proud of him, proud of Mrs. Reagan. I hope he doesn't have a cold. I think he might.
I was interested in a comment you made just a moment ago that you thought his subdued feeling was because of the weight of his first administration. I thought, reading the election returns, that his first administration was a success.
Yes, and its very success means establishes precisely what will be the problems for the second administration. How to deal with a public finance which spent us into a great prosperity, unquestionably, but can also crash. As he said 4 years ago, such deficits will bring ruin, and there never have been such deficits. And secondly, a arms build-up on both the Soviet and the American side that has to be brought to some resolution, which he means to do. There's nothing, this is history time for Ronald Reagan, and good. But meaning to do it and getting it done, he now knows are very different and difficult things.
Thank you, Senator. The phone is ringing. I've got to leave you and answer the phone. Thank you. Tom?
If Bob Dole is on the other end, Roger, you're going to have to give him his office back before the day is out, no doubt about that.
Somebody wanted coffee.
Right. By the way, the president in his speech about the budget freeze used this language: I will shortly submit a budget to the Congress aimed at freezing government program spending for the next year. Now, Cap Weinberger just last week was on Capitol Hill pleading for increases of 5.5% to 7% for the defense budget, and he feels strongly that it must go up some. So there is a good deal yet to resolve, not just on this day, but in the next 4 years, and a battle royal with Congress is expected. We'll be back with more continuing coverage of Inauguration 1985 right after this.
"1909. William Howard Taft was Theodore Roosevelt's hand-picked successor. Later, Taft admitted that every time he heard someone say, "Mr. President," he looked around for Roosevelt.
You never know what you're going to run into out there. That's why Ford Escort has a 5-mile-per-hour bumper that absorbs a lot of punishment, which helps explain why Allstate gives Escort owners reduced rates on all major coverages, something they don't give to any competitor, foreign or domestic. Nice going, Escort. You really know how to take it on the chin. Have you driven the best-built American cars? Have you driven a Ford lately? Oh, dear.
From all over the world, crude oil comes to this Sun Company refinery where we make Sunoco products. Since Sun produces nearly 10 million gallons of gasoline a day, one of the most important jobs we have is safety, and not just at work. Many of us use our safety training as volunteer firemen in our community. All right, you guys, let's go. At Sun, we think putting our energy back into the community is just as important as getting it out.
With the sun, there's energy.
There's only one Super Bowl of cereal, and there's only one taste that makes it. The super taste of Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
Just think of crispy golden flakes.
Delicious, crunchy flakes of corn.
So pure and simple, just can't wait.
Low in sugar, loaded with vitamins and iron.
So good for you, don't hesitate.
For a Super Bowl of our most nutritious corn flakes ever.
What a Super Bowl. Have yourself a Super Bowl. Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Super taste, super good. Kellogg's Corn Flakes.
It was in election booths like this that Americans...
No, but that may just be a matter of time, Tom. You know, as Ronald Reagan was sworn in today, his wife, Nancy, was standing beside him holding the Bible, and that was only fitting, because Mrs. Reagan has been next to her husband, helping him for the last 4 years, and in more ways than most people realize.
I can't imagine life without her.
The president paying tribute to his wife in a campaign film last year, and with good reason. Paying tribute to the glamorous First Lady who has helped him preside over state functions. Paying tribute to the best friend who clearly helps relieve some of the terrible pressure of his office. There is another less public link, however, that may be just as important. Mrs. Reagan's influence on the personnel and policy of this administration. Key advisor Mike Deaver has seen that influence.
If she thought there was somebody around that could help him, she'd push him. If she thought there was somebody around that would hurt him, she'd get involved.
And she'd have an impact?
Absolutely.
Top officials say Mrs. Reagan was instrumental in pushing Alexander Haig and William Clark out of the cabinet, in helping Deaver and James Baker gain control of the White House staff in the first term. She has generally sided with moderates over hardline conservatives, more interested in seeing her husband win than in ideology. This means she also has influence on policy. Angry about his image as a reckless cowboy, she was a key figure in getting the president to talk to the Soviets, wanting him to be seen instead as a peacemaker. All this usually happens behind the scenes. But last summer at the Reagan Ranch, the First Lady seemed to help her husband answer a question on U.S.-Soviet relations.
Doing everything we can. Doing everything we can.
Joseph Lash, biographer of Eleanor Roosevelt, thinks the First Lady has a key policy role: to be honest with the president when no one else will.
To have such a person built into the home, so to speak, who gives it to you straight, it can only be invaluable to the country as well as to the president.
Mrs. Reagan was not always so self-confident. During her first year in Washington, she seemed crushed by criticism of her expensive lifestyle. And then she was devastated by her husband's shooting. A year after the assassination attempt, there were still scars.
Every time he leaves the house, particularly to go on a trip, I think my heart stops till he gets back.
But the pain eased. Mrs. Reagan launched a campaign against teenage drug abuse. And eventually, she seemed to start enjoying herself again. By this summer, she was ready to take on an unusual role for a First Lady, addressing the Republican National Convention.
I drew on your strength many times, particularly the first year in the White House.
And then, as always, thinking about her partner.
Let's make it one more for the Gipper, and thank you.
For all her clout and her new willingness to be public about it, Mike Devers says Mrs. Reagan's priorities haven't changed.
Does she have a sense of history and of wanting to leave her mark as a First Lady on history?
No, I don't think so. I really think that her principal interest is his mark on history. Her primary agenda is Ronald Reagan.
Pure and simple.
Pure and simple.
First and last.
First and last. Always.
Still, Mrs. Reagan's influence in the second term should be even greater than in the first, because with all of the president's old California friends leaving the White House, she'll be the only longtime advisor who's still there. Tom?
Chris, do you think that she'll take a more active public role in this next four-year period in terms of drug abuse and the programs that she's interested in?
Well, absolutely. In fact, she has a big event planned this spring. She's invited First Ladies from all around the world to come to this country to meet with her here at the White House and then go down to a big conference on drug abuse down in Atlanta. And after the president's trip to Europe for the economic summit in May, she's talking about traveling around the world, taking her fight against drug abuse, not only to this country, but to countries all over.
That would be a big step out for her to do something quite like that, to go around the world on her own and talk about drug abuse or any policy.
No, I get the feeling that it really has been a continuum since the bad days of 1981. She is feeling more and more self-confident about her public role as a First Lady, both in terms of advising the president on policy, although I don't think she's going to go too far publicly on that, but much more so in terms of her role doing good works, especially drug abuse.
And yet there is this continuing controversy in the pages of some newspapers, at least, about how much money she spends on her lifestyle. The Washington Post, figured that she spent $46,000 on her wardrobe for this inaugural weekend. She said that was vastly overstated.
Well, I think they said that's what the average shopper would have spent. But, you know, Mrs. Reagan has a long-time relationship with some of those big designers, and I guess they may think it's pretty good publicity for her to be wearing their clothes sometime over the course of this weekend.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
When you're comparing the figures, you might remember that Mrs. Lincoln, Mary Lincoln, spent $27,000 on the fabrics for the gowns that she wore at the first inaugural.
And as they say, that was a different dollar then than it is today.
It was a sounder dollar in some ways than it is now.
John, this whole business about Mrs. Reagan and her role, and the First Ladies necessarily have become even more prominent, I suppose, in our consciousness. They've been prominent down through history, but because of this density of information that we're dealing with all the time, everything that moves in the White House gets a lot of coverage on television and so on. I find personally nothing wrong with a man having a wife that he can rely on for good judgment and in whose decisions he has some faith. I think that it's a...
Well, without trying to be sexist about it, I agree absolutely that they are a team, and I think they're a wonderful and inspiring marriage. I think it also helps to have a woman around the house. I think she can do things for a president that he cannot do for himself. And my favorite in all the world in this is Dolly Madison. You know, we hear a lot about Dolly Madison. Most people don't remember. Her husband, James Madison, was Jefferson's Secretary of State. Jefferson was a widower, so for 8 years, She was the hostess at the White House. Then her husband got to be president. That was another 8 years, and for 13 more years, she lived across the street. She holds the all-time record for influence.
There's Mrs. Reagan at her husband's right as she led him right around that end of the table, as a matter of fact. They're assembling in a statuary hall for the luncheon arranged by the Congressional Delegation Committee, the Congressional Arrangements Committee. That's Senator Charles Mathias arranging the chair for her there. This is where the luncheon will occur, and I don't think we're going to get to see a great deal of this unless they change the arrangements on this as well. Other members of Congress and 6 Americans who were drawn for the way they represent the cross-section of our lives. Mac Mathias from Maryland was called down to the White House last night to help with the rearrangements. Everyone had expected that today's ceremony would take place outside. But in fact, they had to quickly assemble in the rotunda.
You know, that's the room where the House used to meet before they got the new House chamber.
That's right.
Beautiful place.
And it wasn't all that long ago. I was when Ronald Reagan was a young man in his early 20s, for example, the Supreme Court would meet in the rotunda of the Capitol. Washington has changed a great deal over the last 50 years, a great deal over the last 20 years for that matter. By the way, to bring you up to date on why all of this has changed on this day, it's now, John, pushing 7 degrees out there, getting absolutely tropical. The wind chill is merely 11 degrees below zero, so that's why things have changed in this capital city on inaugural day, 1985, January 21st.
And it's by no means over. The president is going to see all those kids who came to play in the parade.
That's right, he's going up. We were just looking at Washington, if we can just see that once again. It's a pristine day in terms of the clarity of the air and the way the Capitol and the other memorials come out against this crisp winter day. Roger Mudd is safely inside, snug and warm in Bob Dole's office, the hideaway in the Capitol, and he's there now with another senator who will be playing a key role in the deliberations in the years ahead. Roger?
Tom, this is Senator Simpson of Wyoming, and he's the newly elected Assistant Majority Leader of the United States Senate. Did you hear from the
hang gliding accident? An executive with a wheelchair company, chairs which she helped design.
Well, naturally, I'm really thrilled and excited. It's quite an honor to be able to represent all small business folks throughout the United States. I'm thrilled.
A truck driver's truck driver, 60-year-old Butch Plunkett from Midfield, Alabama, driver of the year in 1984, 36 years and more than 2.5 million accident-free miles. Chuck Stover, labor leader from Suitland, Maryland, president and business manager of an operating engineers local. 55 years old, he's been in the union since he was 14, and he voted for Mondale.
It's an honor, I think, to be asked, to be invited. I don't have to agree with the president's policies. I don't have to agree with his philosophy. He is the president.
Stan Ulrich, a 33-year-old wheat and feed grain farmer from Winfield, Kansas. He owns 1,600 acres, and he's active in American Farm Bureau Federation affairs.
First of all, we were very surprised to get the invitation, and now we're just excited and looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good time.
Bud Moss, a 20-year veteran of the San Antonio Fire Department, an Hispanic member of the executive board of the International Firefighters Association, and he also voted for Mondale.
I don't think anywhere else a firefighter living 1,000 miles away or 1,200 miles away from Washington, D.C. would be invited to go to one of these things and shake hands and be there with the president. It's amazing, man. I love it.
Well, it's not firehouse food that they're having now. It's Statuary Hall in the Capitol, but that's where they all are assembled for this luncheon that is going on, even as we speak. And within the NBC News ranks of our assembled correspondents today, there's been a kind of unspoken intramural competition to see who can come up with the most unusual cap to ward off the cold temperatures that are now 7 degrees above zero, 11 degrees below zero with the wind chill factor. And the winner, John Chancellor, in the beret category is NBC News correspondent Steve Delaney, who's just outside the Capitol, and he's been taking a look at the prospects for a second term and what we may expect. Steve?
Thanks, Tom. This is not nearly as fancy as Douglas Kuiker's cap, which is designed to scare ducks away. Actually, it's too cold out here even for the pigeons at the moment. We've been tossing around the term lame duck in terms of the second Reagan term. The lame duck was in vogue here not too many years ago when congressmen would come back and sit again after they'd been defeated, and they'd do great mischief, so that was changed. But it can apply to a second term of a president. He gets reelected, in fact, because people agree with what he did the first time around, and it's in essence a reward. But the spoils of that victory can fade because an erosion of president.
They've already got, John Chancellor and I were wondering earlier about how well they would do, and it looks like they're doing pretty well, John. They've got them all in order, and they've got a big American flag in the background. They'll have a very good show. There were some mountain men who came in from Arizona and from different places. These are one of my favorite groups. They go out and they dress themselves in native outfits that they make themselves after having trapped the animals, and they got raccoon caps and muskets and skins and all kinds of things. They found a way to entertain themselves last night. They were disappointed, but at the same time, they knew that they could hang out in Washington, D.C., where you still can get a drink after 9 o'clock at night. We'll be back after this.
I believe in the freedom of our American hostages. The last documents have now been signed.
I think there will be a concern that all of us will feel until we know they're airborne and actually on their way, in view of the history of this whole thing.
Do you think that this whole process could possibly unravel and fall apart on this implementation hang-up?
When you use the word possible, I can imagine any horror story, but I think that this is doable and manageable, but there are no guarantees, as you know.
On this, the final half day of the Jimmy Carter presidency and the start of Ronald Reagan's administration, there is great hope in Washington and in this country that the long ordeal of the American hostages in Iran may finally be over.
The latest word we have is that there are no hitches. It looks like it is all just about to happen.
It is ironic that the hostage issue, which helped to defeat Jimmy Carter, is haunting him right up until the last moments of his presidency.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Carter aides hoped that the hostages would be released before noon, but a final Iranian delay cost Mr. Carter the opportunity to announce their freedom.
Some 30 minutes ago, the planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free of Iran.
Yes, Tehran Air Traffic Control says some 7 minutes ago, the red and white Boeing 727 roared down the runway one after another.
It's all over.
He's coming to America.
Yes, sir, we're going to go. It's all over.
Changed a good deal in the last 4 years, of course, and we'll be talking with one of the hostages in just a moment, but we want to show you now President Reagan leaving the White House. He's leaving in Marine One, his personal helicopter that will take him to Capitol Center, where, as we say, that they have assembled hastily a band and marching unit festival, for lack of a better phrase at this time. Traditional point of departure for the presidents. It was from there that Richard Nixon left. It was from there that Jimmy Carter left when he left office 4 years ago. And as I say, one of the people that we all were thinking about and worrying about and were relieved to know that he was going to be okay 4 years ago is with us today. Bruce Langan, who's come in from Cincinnati, where you tell me it's colder than it is here.
Closer to Canada.
What was it like when you watched those pictures of 4 years ago?
Today?
Yes.
Exciting. Reliving our freedom. The excitement of regained freedom. That's what it was like. That's what today is all about, after all. Reaffirmation of our freedoms.
Will you always remember what you felt on that day?
Oh, I can assure you I will. Not that I think about it every day. I don't expect to, and I don't think the public should, but we should recall what it meant in the way we regained freedoms, reaffirmed our freedoms, and remember those who put their lives on the line, and not least those who tried to rescue us in Tehran. Remembering today as well, Tom, the fact that some people aren't free, including 5 of our colleagues who sit in the unknown and difficulty of terrorism in Beirut.
How did it change your life, that experience?
Not substantially. I usually answer that question by saying you ought to ask my wife. She knows best. But I think all of us have a new appreciation of our freedoms. I feel very strongly about that. I said on the south lawn of the White House the day we got back that we would all forever have a love affair with our country. And I think that love affair deepens every day for each and every one of us.
Mr. Langen, is the United States doing enough now to deal with what we might call the causes of terrorism? Not their effects, but what makes terrorism?
John, that's a big question, a very difficult question to answer. I think we've learned from the lessons of Tehran in the sense that we've got to do more to, not simply to protect, that's important, terribly important, but to get at, as you suggest, some of the root causes, some of the grievances, the problems, the difficulties that give rise to that, cause the kind of mindset, if you will, of those who take that course to seek redress of their grievances, to understand better the culture and hang-ups of the Middle East, if you will. In particular, I'm talking about the Middle East, although that's not where terrorism alone is known. It's a worldwide phenomenon, but particularly felt in the Middle East. I've often said as well that terrorism is a learning experience. There is no 100% protection against it. Can't be. But we learn from every experience, both in protection and as well in the need to examine closely within ourselves and with our friends and with governments in that part of the world what we need to do more urgently even than we have to try to bring about an atmosphere in which that kind of extreme resort to action isn't felt necessary.
A lot of people think that we ought to kick fannies a lot more than we do, that we ought to strike back at terrorists and their suspected bases more than we do. Send up the word that you can't fiddle with the United States.
That's important, too. They should know that. The question there, though, Tom, is having done that, what have you achieved? Have you worsened your problem, or have you helped reduce it? It raises, again, the question of intelligence. Nothing is more important in coping with terrorism, including taking, perhaps, the kind of action you suggest, and it may be that that time will come. Nothing is more important than that we know who, what, when, where, and above all, what's the result going to be if we take that kind of action? Does it help our problems or does it deepen our problems? And you don't have an answer to that in advance always. It's something you have to approach in each and every case.
You're a serious career man. You were suddenly one of the best-known Americans anywhere in the world for a period of time. Has that begun to wear off, or wherever you go, do people still talk to you about it?
No, Tom, long since that's worn off. That didn't need to continue and wasn't expected to continue. I say again, the important thing is that we remember what we learned from that experience, both what you talk about, John, and about the need to remember our freedoms in this country. Inauguration Day then, today, always is fundamentally a reaffirmation of our freedoms. That's what we've seen in that magnificent pageantry today. That's what we need to remember.
Thank you, Mr. Langen. We're going to show you some more pictures now. The President, as he carries out this day, which has been changed considerably, he has now arrived at Capitol Center, where he will go through the cold daytime temperatures of Washington. It's just outside of town here actually in Maryland. And what we'll do is see the President enter that in just a few moments, and he'll be greeted by the bands that had hoped that they would march in a parade, but will not be able to. We'll be back with more of all of this in just a moment.
In 1941, Franklin D. Roosevelt was sworn in for a third time, the only American to be elected president more than twice.
So help me God.
Vendors on the street sold buttons saying "To hell with Hitler." The inaugural parade featured armored cars and tanks.
NBC News brings you total coverage of the day's events. From NBC News at Sunrise with Connie Chung, to Today with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Pauley, to NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. From the war in the Middle East, to the deficit debate in Washington, to the famine in Africa, NBC is there. Understand the world in which you live. Turn to NBC News.
It's one of the biggest annual events in Central Illinois, and you can be a part of it. The WICS Greater Springfield Garage Sale, returning to the center for its third big year. Get a jump on your spring cleaning. Call 528-4470 and reserve your space today. Over 10,000 people attended last year's sale. Don't be left out. Call 528-4470 and be a part of the WICS Greater Springfield Garage Sale at the center, Saturday and Sunday, February 23rd and 24th. Don't miss it.
Hello. Do you live in a nursing home in Illinois? Do you know someone who does? Do you need to talk to someone about the care a nursing home resident is receiving? Call 1-800-252-4343, day or night. The Illinois Department on Aging and the Illinois Department of Public Health want you to receive good care. Call the nursing home hotline, 1-800-252-4343.
Hey there, cool cats. It's me, Heathcliff, coming at you with a brand new batch of TV adventures, thrills, action, and laughs. They're all here on Heathcliff with Riff Raff and Cleo and their troublemaking pals Hector, Mungo, and Wordsworth, joining in on all the fun. I come from a long line of bad pussycats.
It's Heathcliff, today at 3:30, right after Scooby-Doo, here on 20.
This is WICS Springfield.
It's the day for the changing of the guard. We're going to have our own transition going on here. John Chancellor, who has been with us as our commentator, as he always is, for the political part of the day, will be sliding out of here in just a few moments. John, always a pleasure. We didn't get to talk about everything that we wanted to, but then you and I never get to finish that kind of business.
Hello.
And we're joined, of course, by Connie Chung, who is here and is going to be helping out as we go not to the parade as we had expected that we would. Connie, you had all of those notes assembled for the Sacramento mounted marching posse and all.
And all those 730 horses, which I hope they aren't going to try to push into the Capitol Center. You know, the Capitol Center was going to have an ice hockey game. And so they had to cover it with wooden planks very quickly so that the bands wouldn't get frostbite in the Capitol Center, at least. And there's going to be a Bullets game tonight, a Washington Bullets game tonight after all.
It's a very active day in Washington. What about, they're going to have any kind of a public audience at the Capitol Center? I gather
No,
not.
in fact, I was listening to the radio earlier, and the Washington area was warning people not to go to the Capitol Center because no spectators would be allowed at all. Basically, it's just about a half a dozen bands, and the president will be stopping by to say hello. But basically, the bands that are playing even, Tom, won't be heard by the president. There's just a few, a handful from various states. There's one from Louisiana. They call them they like to be called Reagan's Cajuns.
Well, speaking of Reagan's Cajuns, that's a familiar note for the president. Ruffles and flourishes getting ready for Hail to the Chief. That means that the president is arriving at Capitol Center. Here he comes now off Marine One. That's Vice President and Mrs. Bush arriving inside. The President and Mrs. Reagan going into their motorcade, which has been assembled.
There's one group there, Tom, a band from California. You would think that the band from California would be playing there. They play often. They're called the Wildcat Glenn Wilson High School Band. And they perform at Disneyland, and they perform at the Rose Bowl.
Glenn Wilson was a congressman from there, and that's in Hacienda Heights. Here's the Vice President.
My role is kind of a basic substitute MC, I think, here today. But I really just came to be with the president, and he will express our appreciation, but our regret that you all didn't get to perform.
Remove Connie now.
Is only superseded by the fact that it has been a spectacular day, a historic day, and I think a wonderful day in every way. But we are grateful to each and every one of you for participating, for being with us, and for really representing what this inauguration of one country together is all about. It transcends politics, it transcends party, and indeed it represents, with the representation from all over this country, the unity of the United States. We're grateful to each and every one of you. I, being a little bit of a chauvinistic Texan, would like to thank the Lee High School Band from Midland, Texas, but so would the Lee High School band like to be recognized. But we are very pleased, and I don't know how many of you got to see any of the ceremony at the Capitol, but as I say, transcending politics was this feeling.
Well, Vice President George Bush talking to the members of the band. We'll be back to hear what President Reagan has to say to them as they're assembled at the Capitol Center in just a moment. But first, this message.
1861, Abraham Lincoln became president of a divided nation, with work continuing on the unfinished Capitol behind him. He ordered work to continue as a symbol that the Union would survive.
This is a Mustang LX that comes with reclining bucket seats, that comes with AM/FM stereo with premium sound, comes with power steering, power brakes, power door locks, comes with interval wipers, speed control, and styled road wheels. And it goes for less than $6,900. Mustang LX. Have you driven the best-built American cars? Have you driven a Ford lately?
Won't happen again.
Yvonne, how do you do it? Tennis, family, and you had iron-poor blood.
Now I protect myself. Exercise, eat the right foods, and take Geritol.
Wrong. For complete protection, we take new Geritol Complete.
Geritol's high-potency iron plus 29 vitamins and minerals, more than any leading brand. More vitamins at 100% RDA than any leading brand. New Geritol Complete.
Ready?
I am for new Geritol Complete.
For Geritol Complete protection.
Sugar Ray Leonard goes sugar-free.
And so there's Sugar Ray Jr.
With Carnation sugar-free hot cocoa mix. I like it because it's sugar-free.
I like it because it's chocolatey.
Carnation is sweetened with NutraSweet, so you don't get too much sugar.
It's real chocolate.
It's sugar-free. And real chocolatey. Sugar Ray goes sugar-free with Carnation sugar-free hot cocoa.
And so does Sugar Ray Jr.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. And when many adults get a cough, they play doctor at home. They treat their cough with the same medicine they originally bought for their children. They need one of the adult formulas from Vicks for the coughs adults get with the strength adults need. Formula 44 for coughs, 44D for coughs with congestion, and now Formula 44M for coughs with congestion and a raw, irritated throat. The adult formulas. You can't buy anything more effective.
The adult formulas from Vicks, of course.
Tom Brokaw back now with Connie Chung. And Connie, we're going to go instantly to the Capitol Center where the bands are assembled. Also the Vice President of the United States and the President, who's arrived there to greet the bands, who are disappointed because they couldn't march in the inaugural parade.
American Presidential Inaugural and Mrs. Ronald H. Walker.
They're introducing the various members of the inaugural committee now who are coming in. Ron Walker, who had to give the band directors last night the bad news. He said he thought he'd anticipated everything, but he couldn't deal with Mother Nature. And as he put it, it's just the Lord's way of letting us know who's in control here.
He had taken great pains to try to include the bands that he thought should be included from each of the 50 states, but now he even had a more difficult time of selecting these few bands for this event.
Now we're about to see the President.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan.
From a couple of members of a Minnesota marching band earlier that they were trying antifreeze on their instruments. They were describing it as the non-toxic variety. We want to remind everybody that can be very dangerous business, especially if you don't know what you're doing, because it does have a high toxicity. Most antifreeze does. The kids from Minnesota are familiar with antifreeze, however. Kids will be disappointed for about 15 minutes, but they're all together there, and it sounds like they're having a pretty good time. The bands in various parts of the Capitol Center, which is going to be the site of a hockey game tonight.
gentlemen, the All-American College Marching Band.
That's the same band, Tom, that performed at the presidential gala on Saturday. I don't know if many of you may have seen it. Mac Davis was singing God Bless the USA, the one that goes Proud to be an American. And then all of these kids came out from all corners, all directions of the center there. Actually, it was the Washington Center where the gala was held.
From the colleges and universities across our nation.
And I think they're going to play the same song again. They're going to play God Bless the USA.
Directed by Dr. Arthur C. Mortner.
The thing that you can say about President Reagan, few public officials like, great ceremony better than he does. He thoroughly enjoys himself on these occasions.
And he is 73 years and 350 days old today, and the man just looks terrific. I'm sure the president's doctor...
He has a great birth date, actually. February 6th is a wonderful day.
What is that? Is that your birthday?
Well, no, it's just, yeah, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is.
He looks terrific. I'm sure the president's doctor took into consideration, in addition to the care and the concern about the kids who would have been in the parade, but the president's health as well. He would have been outside for that swearing in for about an hour, you would think. And it probably really would not have been smart to have him out there for that long a period of time, since he is the oldest president that we've ever had.
Let me tell you, Connie, that there were people a lot younger than he is who were awfully relieved that the doctors recommended that they not sit outside because it was going to be a painful time.
Tom, you had mentioned earlier President Harrison, who had, that was one of your favorite stories. He had been out there braving the cold and had died a month later. But the Benjamin Harrison, his grandson, was inaugurated in a rainy, terribly rainy day. It was raining so hard that while he was giving his inaugural address, even his wife left before it was over.
He wanted to show that there was at least one Harrison who could defy the elements. I want to put favorite story in some context. I mean, it's a tragic story, of course. The old hero of Tippecanoe braved the elements in the early part of the 19th century, delivered an hour-and-a-half inaugural address, rode his horse for 2 hours without coat, died of pneumonia in April. It just does show you what can happen, and we do have to be careful of the health of all leaders.
The previous inaugural that had been the coldest on record was Ulysses S. Grant. It had been sleeting, and the food had frozen. Even canaries in cages had frozen to death. Cadets had fainted from that terrible cold, and of course the musical instruments didn't work as well.
We'll be back with more on the Band Festival from Capitol Center, where President and Mrs. Reagan now are enjoying a concert instead of an inaugural parade because of the bitter cold temperatures. We'll be back with more of all of that after this.
1973, Richard Nixon was inaugurated for a second term. His was the most expensive inaugural ceremony in history until the inauguration of Ronald Reagan in 1981.
Do you want to buy a phone? It's cheaper than AT&T.
What you really need is cheap long distance.
And of course, our business systems are cheaper than AT&T.
Everyone's saying they're cheaper than AT&T, but nobody's saying they're better. All they can say is that they're cheaper, to which we say, you get what you pay for. Whether it's telephones, long distance, information systems, or computers, AT&T.
Sunday morning at the Thomas House, pancakes, the funny papers, and of course, 100% pure Minute Maid orange juice. We want the best, so our first taste of the day is Minute Maid. That's because the folks who make it really know how to get the best out of an orange. They even have their own special way of capturing the natural flavor of an orange at its peak of ripeness. That's why Minute Maid tastes so delicious. Now, what makes you so delicious?
Minute Maid.
We know how to get the best out of an orange.
My stuffy nose. Congested? Congestac.
Ah.
My clogged sinuses.
Congested? Congestac.
Ah.
My chest is so congested. Congested? Congestac. Introducing Congestac tablets. More complete congestion relief than Actifed or Sudafed. They only relieve head congestion. Congestac relieves chest congestion, too.
And Congestac won't make you drowsy.
Congested? Of course. New Congestac. Ah.
My most embarrassing moment with my dentures? My graduation day last June. When I went up for my diploma, I sneezed. I thought I'd lost my upper plate. Then I discovered a new denture adhesive. New improved Super Polygrip.
See for yourself. New Super Polygrip has improved holding power. We improve the grip to give you more confidence.
Even when I sneeze.
New improved Super Polygrip. We improve the grip to give you more confidence.
We're back now, continuing our coverage of Inauguration 85. Connie Chung, I'm Tom Brokaw, and this is Ed Rollin, who's one of the generals in President Reagan's political organization, the line officer during the campaign, of course. It is a shame, but things have gone awfully well today, Ed. I know that there's a lot of disappointment about the collapsed schedule and all.
Just too bad for all the young people that came from all over the country to participate in the parade, but it's still a great day for America.
Were you surprised by the president's speech being as low-key as it was?
I think I wasn't surprised. I think the president realizes that as we start a second term, there's a lot of problems facing this country, and certainly he anticipates that, and he's ready to go try and tackle some of them. And I think that it's a little more serious. It's not quite the excitement as there was the first time, because you certainly can anticipate the problems a little bit more, having lived with them over the last 4 years.
I don't know whether you heard Senator Simpson of Wyoming, a member of your own party, up there talking about the president being a toothless tiger at this point because the budget process moves to the Hill.
Well, I don't think anybody can underestimate this president. Many people have over the 20-year career that he's been in politics, and I think that's a serious mistake, and that goes for Senator Simpson or any of the rest of our Republicans. This president has tremendous support from the American public, and I don't think you can measure him by any other political standards.
Mr. Rollins, the president has said that he has little interest in his place in history. How do you interpret that? You know him very well.
I think that's a very sincere statement, Connie. He is a man who very, very definitely isn't driven by ego needs that many politicians are, and I think he really does want to do what's in the best interest of the country.
Ed, we're going to ask you to just stay with us for a few more moments, and then we'll take you back to the Capitol Center here. You can look in with us. The president so obviously enjoys ceremonies like this. Do you expect... Now, let's be realistic about this. He's in the very best health possible. He's a very active and energetic man, but he's about to be 74 years old. Will we, in the next 4 years, see less of the president at public ceremonies, less of him getting out and around the country? Because, after all, he doesn't have to run for re-election.
I think, Tom, in all honesty, he likes to get out among the American public. It stimulates him. He just really has a good feel for the public when he gets out there, and I think he'll continue to want to do that.
All right, Ed Rollin, we thank you very much for coming by here today.
Thank you.
We're going to go back to the band festival, as it now is. We'll hear the end of the American music, and then we'll hear the president with a few of his own remarks. What are your plans for the next 4 years?
I'm going to try and make a little money.
You'll do all right. If you do as well for the president, for yourself as you did for the president, you'll be all right. Ed Rollin, now let's go back to the Capitol Center and take a look at the band festival. Thanks, Ed. What we expect to happen here, Connie, is that we're going to have about 6.5 minutes of American music, so-called, and then the president will address these young people and bands that include military bands as well.
You know, this particular band, the All-American Marching Band, College Marching Band, was not supposed to be in the parade. Isn't that funny? And they're actually playing here.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the chairman of the 50th American Presidential Inaugural Committee, Mr. Ronald Walker.
Oh, my goodness. What a wonderful parade it would have been, wouldn't it?
Okay, Ron Walker will introduce the president. We'll hear from the president momentarily, but first this word.
(1913). Woodrow Wilson was sworn in, as were a dozen presidents before him, at the feet of two statues depicting Columbus and Pocahontas. When the east front of the Capitol was extended in 1959, the statues were removed at the order of House Speaker Sam Rayburn, who thought their depiction of Indians was distasteful. They are now stored in a Smithsonian warehouse.
Wednesday on St. Elsewhere, the emergency room tackles a violent patient.
Are you having trouble breathing?
Not as much as him.
Can Elliot keep his head in a tight situation? Wednesday. Meet Liz, ex-secret agent, Maggie, cat burglar, Danny, the driver. Sunday, they're together and they're invincible as codename Foxfire. Sunday.
When you walk on the beach, does he still look at you the way he used to?
Thanks, Slender World. I am so glad I found you. I used to be envious of all my thin friends, but I don't have to be envious any longer. I like the shape I'm in.
Do you like the shape you're in? Call Slender World today for a free sample treatment.
Probably one of the most important things in your child's life is nutrition. The Springfield Urban League is offering a special supplemental food program for pregnant and breastfeeding women, infants under 1 year, and children ages 1 to 5. This program provides health and nutrition education counseling, nutritious food items, and referrals to outside agencies. To be eligible, you must meet income standards, live in Springfield, and have a medical or nutritional need. For more information, call the Urban League at 753-0330.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ag Day. I'm Wayne Jenkins.
Every weekday morning, Ag Day brings you up to date on the latest national and worldwide agricultural news stories. From crop reports to farm policy and the latest ag research, American farmers turn to Ag Day for the daily news that's affecting their trillion-dollar industry.
The president said his administration has been trying to get farmers back on the road to prosperity.
America counts on farmers. American farmers count on Ag Day.
Join us for Ag Day weekday mornings at 6 a.m. here on 20.
Inauguration 85, we go now to the Capitol Center. This Mrs. Reagan talking to the members of the bands, which could not march in today's parade because, after all, it was canceled.
He happens to be my husband, who happens to be the President of the United States.
An introduction from Mrs. Reagan to the president. She knows him well.
How could you have forgotten me? Well, good afternoon. I'm told that this is the coldest day in inauguration history. But looking out at all of you, I somehow feel there's a lot of warmth inside this building. Who would ever have thought that I'd be the one standing up and talking while all of you were, well, almost all of you were sitting down and listening? It just goes to show here in Washington things have a way of turning out the opposite of how we intend. I know you didn't get your chance to salute all of us, but I just want you to know how happy and how important it was for Nancy, myself, and the Vice President and Mrs. Bush to come here to salute all of you. Whether we and all America were so looking forward to seeing each one of you perform and delight us with your wonderful talents and exuberance, and what a great American family you are. Because whether you come from as far away as Hawaii, California, Texas, Florida, New York or Mississippi, or Washington or Alaska. Where I'm told the team from Alaska was the only one that came here and really was and could have gone through with the parade, because they came with a team of Huskies, and I can't go on naming all your states, because I know all 50 are represented here, and the territories, and you represent America at its best. And you would have given America the greatest show on earth.
And he finishes.
We were all anticipating the parade, and I was looking forward to every unit. I'd heard about all of you, and particularly there was one at someplace in here, I think, is the band from my home, or the town where I was born. And with that band was going to be the pom-pom girls from the high school, Dixon, Illinois, where I graduated. I want to tell you, I have a little knowledge and understanding of some of your problems. I was the drum major of the Dixon YMCA Boys Band. And I had a brief career, because we were asked to head up the parade in a nearby town on Decoration Day. And I know that everyone was briefed about the parade course and everything, but I had also been told that a fellow on a white horse was going to be out in front, and I figured I'll just follow the man on the white horse. I said, who can go wrong doing that? And I was going down the street making with the baton, and pretty soon I thought the music was beginning to sound a little faint. I looked over my shoulder. Everybody turned a corner. I was going down the wrong street all by myself. I kept right on walking, right out of a musical career. Well, we know the tremendous time and personal dedication that each of you put into your preparations. Everything from bake sales to getting church and civic groups to help you raise the money to pay your way, to the long, long hours of rehearsal so that you perform at your very best. I don't want to forget to mention one other very important group of participants who are here with us too, our United States military personnel. Most of you are about pretty much the same age group. And I just want to say something. Back in World War II, General George Marshall was asked by someone what he thought was our secret weapon. And General Marshall said, the best damn kids in the world. And you know something? If he were here today, he could say the same thing because you are. Led by our military, led by Paul Miller, the Director of Ceremonies and Special Events for the Military District of Washington, Deputy Parade Chairman, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Frank Turner. They were a tremendously effective organizational team, and they would have been there to line your parade route down Pennsylvania Avenue. And let me tell you, I and all of us up here, George and Barbara and Nancy, we were raring to go. I went searching into the closet. I had a pair of Long Johns. I was going to put them on. Last time I wore them was the 1980 primary campaign in New Hampshire. But it would have been a magical moment to tuck away and cherish with your loved ones during all your later years. But it was not to be. And I just hope you understand that we only made this decision after we were convinced that it was absolutely necessary to protect your own health as well as the health of the thousands who would be lining the parade to watch you. Believe me, we had professional medical advice in making that decision. And I pledge one thing to all of you today, and that is to serve with the very best of my abilities and to try during these next 4 years to live up to the spirit, unity, and pride that you have brought to Washington, because that's what makes America the greatest country on earth. There's another thought that I'd like to leave with you, and that is that your trip here, despite the cancellation of the parade, is still very worthwhile and important. Because all of us together have been participants in a great miracle of modern history. A simple, peaceful continuation of power, ratifying the sovereignty of we the people. There has never been a transfer of power by bayonet in America, and God willing, there never will be. Thomas Jefferson once said, "How little do my countrymen know what precious blessings they are in possession of, and which no other people on earth enjoy." Well, today we can rejoice that more and more people on earth are moving toward democracy. And we can rejoice that America, a nation still young compared to so many others, is the oldest, most successful republic on earth. In 2 years, we will celebrate together the 200th anniversary of our Constitution. And what a day that will be for parades, not only in Washington, D.C., but all across our land. So, while we could not go through with today's festivities, we can celebrate in our hearts the continuation of this wonderful experiment in individual liberty and self-government. And we can give thanks that we remain today, as Abraham Lincoln said over 100 years ago, the last best hope of man on earth. God bless you all. Thank you all again. Have a safe journey home.
Mr. President and Mr. Vice President, we now present the grand finale to your...
President and Vice President Bush, President Reagan and Vice President Bush. I'm here with Connie Chung and Dick Wirthland, who's the president's pollster, and that is one of his strongest constituencies, the young people of America. And Connie and I will be talking with Mr. Wirthland about all of that in just a moment. But first, this word.
1953. Dwight Eisenhower decreed club coats and Homburgs for the men in his inaugural party instead of cutaways and top hats. Richard Nixon had already ordered his top hat and tails when he learned of Eisenhower's decision.
At AT&T, we know you never think about our torture tests.
Oh, it's just a phone.
Or about our extraordinary quality control.
I hear you fine, Mom. Australia's only halfway around the world.
Or even about how reliably we design things.
It still works.
Who ever heard of a computer that works without air conditioning?
You can take everything we do for granted because we leave nothing to chance.
It's not a total loss. The phone still works.
Whether it's telephones, long-distance, information systems, or computers, AT&T.
Dristan versus Actifed against sinus cold miseries. Both people have sinus congestion and pain.
The pressure is terrible. I'll try Dristan. With pressure, I'll take Actifed.
Both Actifed and Dristan have effective medicines for sinus pressure and sneezing. But Dristan has an extra medicine to relieve sinus pain. Relief Actifed can't give.
I feel better, but my sinuses still hurt.
No congestion, no pressure, no sinus pain. Dristan works.
Dristan, extra medicine for more sinus cold relief.
You've been traded, Rolaids, for acid and gas. Your performance is not up to tempo.
Sorry, but you're fired, Malox. You don't work hard enough. I'm switching to Tempo.
Our relationship is over, Tums. I found someone better. Tempo.
For better relief from acid and gas, people everywhere are switching to Tempo. Its soft form holds 75% more acid-relieving medicine than Rolaids. And soft Tempo dissolves fast. Switch to better relief. Switch to soft Tempo.
I'm glad I found you.
Your sink's clogged.
My new house talking already? So what's clogging the sink, Smarty? Grease, food, hair?
Doesn't matter. Get the all-purpose drain opener, Crystal Drano.
Well, how about Liquid Plumber?
No, it may not work on grease. Drano works on grease and food and hair.
Crystal Drano's great.
There's Liquid Drano, too. Liquid Plumber can't beat it.
There's only one name to know. Drano.
That's my line. There's only one name to know. Drano.
Richard Worthland is with us now. He's the president's pollster, has been for a long, long time. Dick and I think we met, 18 years ago, 1966, when you were doing the polling for the governor, for then Governor Reagan's campaign at that time. And one of the really remarkable political transitions in American life has been how young people respond to him now as compared to how they responded to him then. Do you think that you have this constituency locked up for a while in your party?
Tom, I don't think you can put a lock on young people. They are the most fluid block of voters there is. However, the magnitude with which they supported this president, I think, bodes very well for the Republican Party over the next 5 or 6 years.
We're going to, as you talk, we're going to show you some pictures as well of the president out at the Capitol Center today and how he is able to really communicate with him in a very special way, and the whole symbolism of the patriotism as we see on the monitor there. What can he do in the next 4 years, do you think, that will help you secure that base, the younger voters?
Well, when we went back to 1980 and reviewed the election then, we got only 44% of the young people's vote. This time we got 64%, as a shift of 20 total points. And I think the main reason for that shift is they felt they had a leader who was effective in getting things done. A lot of the young people reject authoritarianism, but the strong leadership that Reagan represented was of great appeal to young voters in this country.
And I understand what you just completed a poll about a week ago. There was a second post-election poll. Tell me, the president's most pressing domestic problem, of course, is the federal deficit. Did you find that in your polling that the people place the blame or the worry on the president or on Congress?
Connie, in work that we've done not only recently but for some time, the burden of proof, I believe, is on the Congress much more than a lot of people realize, in the sense that they do know that the Congress ultimately determines how much the government spends and how much the government taxes. And while clearly getting the deficit under control is a major challenge to the president, as far as the public's concerned, it is a shared responsibility.
Do you find that the president takes your numbers? I know you talk directly to him, and you keep them close to the breast until you talk to him. Does he take that information and actually use it regarding his issues, or just does he proceed with instinct?
Well, it's always a combination, and how the public feels about an issue is considered among many other things in determining policy.
The president has excellent instincts, and I think he uses survey research also very effectively. That is, he uses it only in part. He uses it to judge what issues are building, which ones may be fading, but ultimately he calls the shots. And I think that's one of the reasons that he's been such a successful leader.
All right, Richard Worthman, we appreciate you waiting here for a time this afternoon and coming by and sharing with us your thoughts. And I know that we'll be talking with you a good deal more, and we're awfully happy to have your sisters with you as well today.
Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Okay, we're going to go back now to Capitol Center and hear some more of the music and watch the president there with Vice President Bush and Mrs. Reagan and Mrs. Bush. We'll be back with more on Inauguration Day 1985 after this.
(1881). Chester A. Arthur was sworn in at his New York residence after James Garfield died of an assassin's bullet. It took Arthur's friends several hours to search out a judge who was at home and available to administer the oath of office.
When you drive America's truck, there's one place you'll want to be.
On the road again. My Ford truck and me on the road again. Work or play, there can't be any tougher friend. I can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. Just can't wait to see what's around the bend. When you drive a Ford, you're driving with a friend. My Ford truck and me on the road again.
Tell the truth. Is there a really great tasting decaffeinated coffee?
Oh, yes. Taster's Choice Decaffeinated. It's made with the same superior Arabica beans found in gourmet coffee stores. Carefully roasted and using only natural decaffeinators for the purest coffee taste. Only Taster's Choice uses this gourmet blend, Arabica Supreme. Ah. The more you know about coffee, the more you'll know why the choice for taste is Taster's Choice.
Can you tell which syrup has 1/3 less calories?
You really want to know what I think? Well, I can tell already. This one's really too thick to have less calories. Way too thick.
You're sure?
Rich, too. Yeah, really sure.
Okay, peek at the label.
Uh-oh, Aunt Jemima Light?
Aunt Jemima Light, with 1/3 less sugar, 1/3 less calories than the leading brand, and no artificial sweeteners.
It's too thick to be light.
You eat smoke for 12 hours. So hot you feel like you're working inside a furnace. Yeah, you get a headache. You want something strong. Anacin.
Anacin. 23% more medicine than regular pain relievers. Anacin stops pain fast.
Headache's gone. And no stomach upset. That really takes the heat off.
Anacin. More medicine.
We're going to go back now. I'm Tom Brokaw here with Connie Chung. I'm not Connie Chung. She's Connie Chung. But that's what happens after another 6 hours of dealing with this today. No, you wouldn't.
Actually,
no,
not sitting here for 6 hours.
Furthermore, Mr. Povich wouldn't want you to be Tom Brokaw. At any rate,
what about Meredith?
We're going to go back to the Capitol Center now. We're going to see the President and Mrs. Reagan, Vice President and Mrs. Bush. This is the All-America College Marching Band that has been entertaining here throughout the weekend. They have been providing the music for this festival. The bands that could not march in the parade were brought here today to hear from the president. They're about to leave now. We should also point out that other units could not march as well. Lots of mounted units from around the country, military units, the 101st Airborne. They were disappointed clearly as well. President and Mrs. Reagan now will return to the White House. The schedule calls for them to be there for the remainder of the afternoon, and then they will begin to visit the various inaugural balls that are in place around the capital city tonight.
9 of them.
9 in all.
9 of them.
So it's a long day for the President and Mrs. Reagan.
You know, there were some people